Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, where we explore amazing stories and powerful ideas that shape our understanding of, the world around us. And today, we're going to be talking with a special guest named Parvati Markus. She's a witness to and chronicler of one of the most significant spiritual movements in Western history. For over 5 decades, she has been the intersection of Eastern wisdom and Western seekers. And from her early days as Ram Dass secretary and editor of the transformational classic Be Here Now, her current role is author to Whisper of the Heart, and she's helped bridge ancient wisdom with contemporary understanding in just so many different ways. And her latest book is exploring how our spiritual master's influence continues to touch the lives long after his physical departure. We're going to dive all into that pretty soon. But first, I just want to welcome you to our podcast, to all of our listeners. I am Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer of Authors on Mission podcast, and we are in for a true spiritual treat today. So, Parvati, thank you, and welcome to Authors on Mission. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me here.
It's a true honor. Your work is something very unique and something that has a lot of meaning behind it, something different than I've heard from a lot of the authors here on our podcast. We have people coming in from all different walks of life, but this is the first time I've heard someone who worked with like a true spiritual master. So I'm very interested in learning more about, your backstory and everything. So perhaps we can start off today by, giving the listeners here a little bit of, background more to yourself. I gave a little bit of an introduction, but perhaps you could help us, fill in the gaps a little bit. How did your journey begin?
The spiritual part of the journey, or going back to becoming an editor?
Oh man, well, let's start with the spiritual, because I think that has a lot to do with what led to your editing work. Is that correct? Because a lot of our listeners, we're people who are inspired to share their stories. They want to make their own books, and it's always fascinating for us to hear about how you came to be. So whatever path that took, let us know. How did it all start?
Well, let me just go back to after college, I wound up working for a group in Cambridge, Massachusetts that was made up of all these brilliant people from Harvard and MIT and Brandeis and all those areas around, the Cambridge area. And they were brilliant scientists and thinkers, but they really couldn't write. and the main product of the company were papers. And I was a secretary, which is what a woman could do when she graduated with an English degree in the 1960s. So I started, as I was typing up their talks or their book, whatever it was, I started editing them. And pretty soon I was no longer a secretary, I was officially an editor. So that started right away. And then in 1969, I wound up meeting Ram Dass, who had just come back. He'd come back in 1968 from his first trip to India when he met Maharaji, the Neem Karoli Baba, who is now noted as a major saint in India. Back then, he was very hidden. There were not a lot of people around him. And anyway, I met Ram Dass, and like 3 days after I sort of moved into the group that was around his father's farm at that time, he said, "Can anybody here type?" And I raised my hand, and I became his secretary for the summer, which meant basically he had been already speaking at various places, and people were writing snail mail to him back then. And answering he would record all the answers, to his letters, and I would type them up for him. That's basically what it was. But the wonderful thing was, it was brand new to me. I just knew I belonged there. I didn't quite know why, but I just felt a pull to be with these people.
So then basically by working with him.
With Ram Dass? Well, let me tell you, the first time I met him, I had been at a party and some guy had said, "Hey, you want to go meet a saint?" And 3 weeks before I would have said, "No, they don't exist. Are you kidding me?" But 3 weeks earlier, I had taken acid for the first time. and I had gone into a state of oneness. And when I came down, somebody handed me the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And as I read that over the next few days, it was like, yeah, yep, yeah. So when this guy said, hey, you want to go meet a saint? I was like, sure, why not? Okay,
Yeah.
now anything was possible. And we drove up the driveway, and Ram Dass was standing near his front door, dressed in his white robe, his bare feet and his beard, and doing his mala. And I looked at him, and all I could see was light coming from him. I couldn't even speak. It was that powerful. And fortunately, the guy I was with could. And Ram Dass said, hey, let's go around the hills and meet the people that are here. And this evening, we'll all get together and talk. So we went around there were maybe a dozen people living there at the time. And each one of them, I went, where do I know you from? Where did you go to school? Where did you go to camp? Why do I know you? These are still my best friends. So I had found my tribe. They were strange people. They were walking around going, namaste. I didn't know what they were talking about. So that's why working on Ram Dass's letters was a very important education for me. Because as he answered people's questions in their letters, I started learning the vocabulary, learning, the concepts, learning all these things that were brand new to me because we were not taught anything Eastern in college. I had a major course called Western Civilization, but nothing about the East. So this was all very new. And so anyway, after that summer, I went to New York and got a job because I wanted to make money so I could go to India too. Because whatever Ram Dass had gotten, we wanted to get it from the source. And he started sending me his handwritten copy of what became the His Story part of Be Here Now, the beginning part of Be Here Now, where he talks about his journey. And I would type that up and edit it and send it back to him. So that was what I did for Be Here Now. I didn't have anything to do with the brown paper part. Here now.
Understood.
Just the His Story part. Okay?
Right, understood. So so many different directions to take here. I guess I first want to sort of start by saying, just making a comment on your journey, because kind of started in what a lot of people would call sort of like a typical normal job, right? Like you're a secretary, and I'm sure you found a lot of purpose in helping and working with who you did. But a lot of people also take that step, and to our listeners out there, they too are in roles and jobs that are pretty common and they love doing. But then kind of just by following your daily path and, working with, so many people, that's how you stumbled upon what now is sort of your calling. And I think that's just something beautiful, because you took that and you ran with it. And here you are now, having, worked on many different pieces, and you did write the Whisper in the Heart, correct? Like,
well, before that, I wrote Love Everyone.
Love Everyone. Okay, yeah. So there we go. Yeah. I mean, but it all began with something like you probably never expected that this would come that day that somebody asked you at the party, do you want to meet this person? Right. So that's
I had no idea that my whole life was about to change at that point. Yeah. The interesting thing about becoming an editor at this organization I worked for was that you just can't be afraid to go ahead and do what you know needs to be done. I mean, I didn't ask anybody, can I edit this for you? I just went ahead and did it.
Okay, yeah. So like they would give you the letters, and then you would just kind of be like, this doesn't sound right, and you would go ahead and fix it up. That's how it works.
And fix it up,
Wow.
So,
okay.
Well, not Ram Dass's stuff. I'm talking about earlier when I was working
working
in the world.
Yeah, I'm sure like all their technical jargon was just like too much for the ordinary reader to access. So I'm sure you were able to kind of edit it and make it coherent and flow better, correct grammar, that sort of thing. Is that?
Well, my job as an editor has always been to be the reader. In other words, if anything is there that I don't think the reader will get or understand, or people who are experts, when they write something, they don't realize that they may skip steps that other people need to follow what's going on. So I would always say, hey, how did you get from here to here? The reader needs to know how to do that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I actually was just writing a blog post about the same content. It's kind of like just this huge paradox where you're an expert in your field and you can, recite this content like the back of your hand. But then when you put it on paper, it sometimes just doesn't resonate with all audiences like you need it to. So that's great that you were able to help them get out of that little bit of a rut and put it,
Right.
streamline it for everyone to understand. It's important. But yeah, I mean, aside from the editing role, along with the whole story you just told me, I think it's incredible how you went from that, right, to editing with Ramdas, and then you wrote your own book based on the teachings that you just learned from his letters and from responding to that mail of his.
It
I mean, it's
wasn't
just
quite as, I mean, I wrote my first book, which was this one, which is Love
love
Everyone,
everyone.
when I was 70.
Okay.
Okay. So in between Ram Dass's book, which was, came out in 1972, be here now, to when I actually started writing my own books, I worked on a lot of people's books. It
Okay.
was
So you
not,
waited until you actually wrote your own. It took a very long time.
it
What,
took a very long time. I mean,
why the delay?
I had a couple of kids. I had a lot of other things going on in my life. It was not like time to do that kind of work.
Yeah,
So
I mean, everyone has the right time in their lives that they feel the moment is right. Do you regret waiting, or do you think this is perfect for you, where you were at the place where you knew what the content would be and it felt like the right moment? What would you
right.
say?
Well,
You
I
can go
wrote the
back.
first one because it was something I really wanted to do and I didn't see it existing yet. That one's based all on interviews with Westerners who, like I had done, had gone to India in the early 1970s and met Neem Karoli Baba.
Mm.
So, there were a lot of books written, or well, some books written about Maharaji and Ram Dass, but nothing about all the other people who had had that same experience Ram Dass had.
Okay.
I saw a void and I wanted to fill it. I wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's
And The
always
Whisper
the
in the
best way.
Heart just followed that book because Love Everyone, as I said, was interviews with all the people who had met Maharaji in his body in India. After I published that, people kept coming up to me and going, well, I had this experience of Maharaji. I saw him on a street corner, or I've had dreams about him, or in Kirtan, I suddenly felt, connected to him. So Whisper in the Heart is a book that interviews like 150 people that have had experiences of meeting Maharaji since he left his body in 1973.
What was that like then, collecting all of those different stories? And I'm sure a lot of them were people who came up to you, but there also must have been a lot of research work involved as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you work with a team in doing this, or was this a...
And on Love Everyone, I actually traveled around and I interviewed people, sometimes for days. But for Whisper in the Heart, I did have somebody that was helping me do the interviews. She did some and I did, the majority of them. And then I edited all of them and then did all the, the connective tissue, so to speak. Yeah.
Understood. Wow. So many different questions here. There's so many listeners out there right now who have ideas for their own books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, you worked so hard on so many different projects and you finally were able to find the right one for you with that niche and that need that needed to be done. I guess aside from collecting all of those stories, were there any specific challenges that you had to overcome that perhaps our listeners might, benefit from hearing your approach to them when it came to transitioning from editor to book writer?
Well, I think the most important thing with the kind of book I did is being able to interview the people to get the kind of responses that you want. So basically for Love Everyone, I literally asked people only 3 questions, but they were broad enough to, as I said, many of these people I interviewed for many, many, many hours.
So that one question would lead into hours of conversation.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
It's basically knowing how to listen.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there who need some help with doing that.
Yes.
Learning how to listen. Right. And I'm sure for you, in addition to listening, also, having a part of your brain available for thinking, how is this going to translate into my book as well? What can I take from this? What meaning can I pull from it for my own, project, while also, drawing upon what they're saying and keeping that conversation flowing. That's
Right.
definitely a skill to be learned. I wonder if you've ever considered writing a book on interviewing.
Uh,
Right?
I've got too many other things going on. I mean, the most recent one that came out is a book called Dying to Know, which is this.
I'm glad that you have the book covers with you. So everyone listening right now, take a look. We got a beautiful design there. Did you do the design work yourself?
No, Mandala Publishing did some beautiful work. This is really like a coffee table book, and it's got all sorts of colored, it's full color. And it's the story really of the friendship between Ram Dass and Timothy Leary. And they did a beautiful job. Whoever did the graphic design for the book did a really wonderful job on that. And that's the first time I did a book based on a movie, because there's a movie called Dying to Know.
I did not realize that.
Which was done 10 years ago. You can find it online.
Okay.
By Gay Dillingham. And this was a book based on the movie, where I took a lot of the dialogue between Timothy and Ram Dass out of the movie, but then filled in a lot of background material about both of them. So there was a lot of writing involved, even though I'm called an editor. There's a lot of writing involved in all of that.
And that's a whole nother skill too, a whole nother journey, taking a movie and translating that into a book. I mean, wow. So first we're talking about editing letters, and now you went from that to interviewing people for your books, and now a whole other skill set that you have done is taking a movie and bringing that onto the pages. I mean, I'm sure that's a whole other set of trials and challenges that you had to overcome as well.
Yes, and actually the biggest challenge I've had is on the book that I'm actually turning in the manuscript tomorrow to the publisher.
Oh my goodness. Is that There Is No Other?
There Is No Other.
Okay.
And that's all based on Ram Dass's lectures and talks and all the things he did over the years, that we have a tremendous media archive of his work. And basically the idea was, if you look around at what's happening in the world right now, and in the US certainly, there's a lot of us versus them. And of course, I was working on it during the election, when there was a lot of us versus So constantly having to look at what was going on and sort of rise above it to the point where there is no other was a real challenge, just conceptually.
Yeah, it's always interesting too, that the factor that whenever you choose to write your book actually does play a part in how your book might turn out, being the tone and the climate that you're writing it in. It affects your mentality, your creativity, and the words that you're going to be putting onto that page. It's a whole other factor too.
Although I did avoid politics, but completely has been writing the book. So
of course, yeah, but like you just said, like sometimes even like the mental space that you have to be in as you're writing it, even if it's not actually on the page, but it factors in. It does.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wow, I mean, you really have just dabbled in so many different types of projects.
And then there's this one.
Oh, is that a children's book?
That's a children's book. It's
oh my goodness.
Castaspella. It's about the happy little witch. And that was an entirely different project.
That has nothing to do with Ram Dass, I would assume.
No,
it?
Not really, but it does have a spiritual foundation in it, in that the whole concept of the book is based around the importance of friendship.
And that's still a very important message.
So the message is in there, and it's all in poetry. It's all in rhyme. So that was a total challenge.
Yeah, I mean, believe me, I know how hard that can be. I've edited poems on my own, and I know what it's like to try to help somebody find that perfect word that fits within the verse, the right syllables and the right flow. That's a whole nother ballpark. Wow. All of our listeners today are probably thinking like, how does this woman even stay in one straight path here? Because she's got her hands in everything, and everything that you've put out there is amazing content too, that people can learn from. It has powerful messages. I mean,
well, as I said, I spent a long time simply, many, many decades just editing other people's work.
Yeah, and that's kind of how you learned, I guess, right?
All of these books have come out in the last decade. Yeah, because I'm going to be 80 soon. So, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, but
Oh,
I
it's
guess
never too late, people.
it's well, so that's the thing. I guess that answers my question right there, is that you were able to have enough experience, by editing and talking to people and seeing their work, that you were inspired and you knew what worked and what didn't work.
Mm.
So perhaps that's a piece of advice we could leave our listeners, is to say, before jumping in, sometimes you need to experience what it's like from all different sides. And again, to see what's going to be successful, what's not, and learn from others.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't have written any of these, I don't think, any earlier. It just, you really need to train your ear
Right.
to know what works on a page. As I said, it's very different speaking than it is writing.
It always is. Yeah.
It always is. So what works?
Exactly. Now, I guess we should spend some time. We've talked a lot about the different types of projects you've had, but
Right.
the overarching theme in a lot of them, especially, with Be Here Now and your upcoming book, There Is No Other, it's very spiritual, right? And you've been involved in so many different spiritual organizations and initiatives, and a lot of your stories, from what I can tell, but just by kind of looking through them myself before this podcast, it's about making Eastern teachings accessible to more Western audiences. So I wonder, what kind of a role does that play in your writing process? And I mean, was that another added struggle? Did that come naturally to you?
Well, just like anything that you've been involved in for a long time, you know it very well. Like we were talking about an expert writing a book.
Right.
So words to me that are very common, even something like karma or guru or things that are now in the English language, so to speak, that
They weren't always, right?
And weren't always. But there's many other words that are used that I always have to make sure are explained so that people understand what's being talked about. I mean, now it's a lot easier than it was before. I mean, when I think about the 1960s, before I met Ram Dass, or just around the time I met him, the late 60s, early 70s, there were very few books on spirituality in the West, on Eastern spirituality, I should say, West. And, there was no yoga store on every corner. There was no, now everybody, when you say namaste, now people in every yoga studio say that at the end of every class, whereas when I first heard it, it was like, what are they talking about?
Right. Yeah, I can see how, I remember you mentioned that before, and I was like, that's a pretty common word, but yeah, it wasn't always,
No,
and
not
I guess
at
it must be
all.
something wonderful that you were able to see it become more infused with our culture,
Right.
and because that's been something you've been working on for a while through editing, but now that
Right.
you've written the books too, it's like, it must feel very satisfying to know that like so many people are aware of this message as well. And your work has helped that. And, by editing and getting those teachings out there, I mean, you played a huge
Right. I worked on a lot of the memoirs of the people like Krishna Das, who is now very well known, in the realm of chanting anyway. His book, Chance of a Lifetime. A lot of the people that were involved in this trip, I wound up working on their books. We just finished one for Ramdev, who works the executive director of the Living Dying Project, and has worked with conscious dying for a long time. A lot of these are the people I've known from India, from during that time with Maharaji. And a lot of them have gone on in different fields to do very incredible things. And I have wound up doing a lot of their books, with them. So it's...
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an incredible journey that you've been on. And, it's very clear that in whatever field that you're in, you found a way, whether it be at the editing or the secretarial work or the writing work, you have passion in it. And that's something that is very important. Yeah.
And I love it. So that's the other thing. I love what I do.
And that's all you can ask for.
I feel like I'm contributing in some small way to the growth of consciousness. And that to me is what's important.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, people didn't always know about these sort of teachings. It was Namaste is a foreign language. Now it's not as much because, people like you had the foresight to begin spreading this to, all different cultures, embedding it into our lives so that we're more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a very important thing that we need to keep doing. I think all of our listeners today can kind of take that as a piece of advice as well. Whatever book or project they're working on could be something that does the same exact thing, that has the same impact. In whatever field
It's wonderful to find, sort of your home base. It's sort of what is the thing that you are most interested in sharing with other people.
Right. Yeah. And finding that. What would you say to somebody who might be like, I don't know what my message is? I mean, I'm talking as if all of our
whatever your work is, just keep doing whatever it is you're doing and you'll find your way.
Okay.
Something will start calling you.
Yeah. I mean, I ask, there's so many listeners out there right now who maybe, I keep saying they do have an idea for writing a book, but maybe they don't. Maybe they're not sure what their message is. I mean, we learned from you, for example, today that you wrote your book when you found a need that needed to be filled, which is a great tip I like to give to authors. But yeah, I mean, I like that, you said too, like, just keep doing what you're doing, do what you love, and inspirational strike.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, I wasn't looking, none of these are making me rich. You can't go into working on books with the idea that you're going to be, the next Stephen King. It's, or somebody that sells that way, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having to be happy with doing what it is, your dharma, doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. Is that dharma? Dharma is knowing what you're supposed to be doing?
Dharma is, in a way. It's a much bigger concept than that, but that's certainly part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful, to find something like that for yourself that matches who you are inside and something that you can do with your life and spread the message around. And it's important stuff.
To me, as long as it's something that's helping other people.
Definitely. So, I mean, speaking of helping other people, now that you have these books out, and I know it's only been of recent years, but, between these books and the books and pieces that you've edited in the past, have you had a lot of feedback or people coming to you saying or telling you how it has impacted them in their own lives? I'm curious, like, a lot of people get emails saying, like, this book changed me, or because of your teachings, I did this. Can you share an example of that?
Well, I mean, not without pulling up my emails.
Oh, man. Well, you probably remember at least an example without pulling it up.
Yeah, but it is that way. People write and they say, thank you so much. I mean, especially Whisper in the Heart, because there are so many people that have experiences and they go, it was just a dream, or, it was just something I thought I heard during meditation. It was like, there's so much doubt about these kind of spiritual experiences that people have. And this sort of was a way to say, you're not crazy, it's like, and so I've gotten a lot of feedback from people going, thank you, because, it made me not feel alone. It made me feel like this was something that I was not crazy. It's possible that it is possible to meet somebody, a saint who died decades ago and still meet them today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also just very important too, because I can see how a lot of people might doubt themselves when they experience that, or they might, wave it off as just being a dream or, just a spur of the moment thing that came into their mind. How do you, as somebody who's, interviewed so many people, or would you say it's always, going to be that? Is there ever an instance where it is somebody just doubting themselves, or would you say most of the time that is something that is somebody's reality? How do you tell them and show them that it's real and not to doubt themselves, I guess is my question.
Well, that's what the book was about, was showing people that it's real.
Okay.
It's not their fantasy. It's not something they've made up. It's something that they really did experience, and it validates somebody's own intuitive understanding of themselves and the world.
Okay, so by reading your text, then that it gives them, sort of like a methodology for making sure
Well,
that, it's not something you imagined. It was there.
right. It's
Um,
just a validation of your own experiences. So people read it and they go, oh, yeah, there are other people that have looked at a picture and experienced Maharaji, or that have experienced, or whoever,
right. Okay. Yeah. So by hearing the stories of other people, then, like that happened to me too.
Right.
Um,
I mean, it may be Jesus. You've had an incredible experience of walking with Jesus back in the days of, when he was on earth. And you go, well, I mean, that's obviously a fantasy, but no, you may have done that. It may have happened in your past life. You may be re-experiencing that.
yeah. Yeah. And you can't, if it's something that you're feeling, who are you to say that I just imagined it, right? Like
Right.
if it's
Exactly.
something that happened to you, deep inside
Hmm.
that it is. So I can see how by reading your book and your stories, it definitely, um,
Right. When you read 150 stories of
there's the
other
proof, right?
people who have had these types of experiences, you're going, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. This really happened. Yeah.
Right, right. No, I'm wondering, like you've worked with both traditional publishers and spiritual organizations. Do the, commercial aspects, the marketing, that sort of thing, the process is different based between
Oh, so different.
literature, your other career path?
All right. The books that I've done for the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, which is, Love Everyone, Whisper in the Heart, Dying to Know, and There Is No Other, were all done in coordination with the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, which is the
Mhm.
group that has, is sort of holding Ram Dass's legacy. They have all the archives of all his material. They put out a lot of courses. They do a lot of podcasts. They do a lot of, with all sorts of spiritual leaders of today. Um, so they really do the marketing on those books. And I just, if they have a podcast for me to do, I go do a podcast. What I really learned about marketing was doing the children's book because we self-published that. And that's an entirely different world. Entirely. And I must say, I didn't do a great job of that.
How so? How
Well,
so?
because it would have taken a lot of money to do the kind of marketing and social media. And I didn't have the time to do that. I was busy working on other books.
Mm.
I have to work. As I said, I'm not rich. I will be working until I drop dead at my computer. So to pay somebody to do social media, to pay somebody to do the marketing, it just didn't happen. But I did manage to find a producer. I do live in LA, and I found a producer who very much liked it and is putting together a TV animated show called Izzy Casts a Spell based on the book.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's so
So now we're
exciting.
just waiting for Hollywood to get its stuff together so we can pitch it.
Wow, no, that's very exciting. Imagine taking that and putting it onto big screens
All
everywhere.
right, so
That's
that's a whole other
a whole
universe,
nother ballpark too. I mean, let's add it to the
really.
list, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when it comes to marketing and social media management, I mean, nowadays it's honestly a lot easier than you would expect to, have that kind of content out there. I mean, I
Mhm.
recently have a whole blog post about how, like, if you make yourself a content calendar, really plan out your videos or blog posts in advance, it's very easy to, self-market. But you make a good point, not a lot of people have that time, so I completely
Right.
understand that.
It's
Um,
very consuming. I mean, it
yeah,
really is like a full-time occupation to
yeah, well,
successfully market something like by yourself.
exactly right. So, I mean, that's why a team
Mhm.
is, really beneficial to help you. I mean, that's what we do here in Authors on Mission. In addition to angel writing and editing, we also offer marketing services. So,
Mhm.
and if you already have your book written and, you've already edited it, it's good to go, then, we offer just, you can just pull and ask for the marketing service itself. You don't need the whole bundle. It's sort of just
Mhm.
like whatever you need, and our team does work with you depending on your needs. So, it's not as expensive as you'd think either, and especially with the amount of time that you're saving and the ROI in the long run, it does help a lot. I recommend it
Well,
to
we'll have to
some of
talk
our
later.
listeners. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll send you some information, especially when it comes to your new projects too. I mean, it's always important to get your word out there, and
Mhm.
I mean, there's great tips for doing it on your own or with a team.
Yeah,
Whether you have time or not, there's always ways to work around it. Just like
right.
there's time to find time in your busy schedule to write your book. Same thing
Well,
with
that is what I do. So it is the main bulk of my time.
exactly.
And it's not quick. People seem to think, oh, I'm going to write a book on blah. They have no idea what they're talking about or what they're getting into because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
takes
I mean,
time. Yeah.
it does take time, the planning, being inspired enough to sit down and create quality content, going back and editing. And yeah, I can see how, as you are getting to the end point, you're thinking, how am I going to market this, right?
Mm.
One tip, just like an easy, right off the bat, is to plan your book with marketing in mind. One thing that I do with some of my clients is if we're writing a chapter, for example, we could say like, okay, like this is chapter 1 and it's about topic A. Let's stop now and think, okay, what blog post can we pull from this? What's a
Oh,
good
wow.
quick social media,
Yeah.
YouTube video where we already have this content fresh in our minds? Let's film it right now, right? Or let's start drafting some posts, put it on that content calendar. You've released it, as the books are going to come out or the weeks following the book's release. And it just automatically, there you go. There's that promotional content that, is based on your own information and content within the book, but it's ready to go. It's sort of, you have to, if you plan it the right way,
That's if you're the type of writer who writes chapter 1 and it's all done, and then
that
you
is
write
true. Yeah,
chapter 2
sometimes,
and it's all
writers
done.
do bounce around a little bit.
It's
But
never quite that, unless you're somebody who writes an outline and follows it, like writing a paper for school.
so you're not an outline type of gal.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Understood. Yeah, I always like to say, with my clients, an outline is like, the building block to your whole book. It's the blueprint. So you need to have that very clearly, especially if you're working with a team. So you're going
Well,
to,
if you're working with a team, obviously you have to do that.
right. But if it's coming from your heart, like you, and you
No.
sometimes things get a little jumbled, so I can understand that completely.
And it's sometimes when I work with other people on their books, I mean, I'm going through a lot of their content. Say there's somebody that does a lot of teaching or a lot of workshops or a lot of whatever, and they have a lot of recorded material. I have to then go through and see how that material can group into whatever message we're trying to put out in the book.
Right. Well, I'm
So
sure you would agree if they had an outline to begin with, then it would make your life easier.
but they don't.
Doesn't always work like that. Yeah.
No. I mean, you can do that on certain topics, where, it's step 1, step 2, step 3 type of thing, but not with this kind of work. It just doesn't, or at least I don't fit into that category.
Yeah, I mean, never say no though. I feel like there's always solutions to make things a little easier and streamline the
Right.
process. Because imagine how many more books and projects you can get out there if you cut down the writing time in half by having a plan in the beginning. Just as playing a little advocate there. It goes both ways. I get it. It's either, you're letting your creativity stream or it's doing it in a structured way. Both work. Every writer has their own methods. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly you've done so many different projects. You know what works for you and what works for others. What I'm going to ask now, as we sort of start wrapping up our conversation, based on everything you've done, what is a piece of advice that you can give our listeners today who are inspired by you? They love the idea of, interviewing people for stories and also editing projects and the children's book avenue and the fact that your book's going to be picked up for, a TV show. All of this is so inspiring for many people, let alone the fact that you're able to spread, all the culture and infuse it with, our culture as well. What advice can we give somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps? It's a loaded question.
Well, as I said before, the main thing is learning how to listen.
Learning how to listen.
Because even if you're doing fiction, I mean, you want to be able to hear the way people speak. Because certainly in fiction, I mean, I've done a lot of reading for people of fiction. I haven't done fiction myself, other than the children's book. But it's certainly in interviewing, the main thing is to ask your question and then listen. Don't keep popping in with your own stories. It's not about you. It's about the person you're interviewing. It's, a lot of people always want to put in their own experience, their own thought, in the midst of a conversation. It's really important to listen and to, if somebody stops talking, you ask a question that will prompt them to continue.
Understood, right. So
Yeah.
instead of just like, making it about yourself, make it about
Right.
that person.
Right. It's not
Validate what
about
they're
you.
saying.
It's not about
Exactly.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about, I think we call it active listening, right? You repeat
Mhm.
it back, you say, I understand you, now keep going. So it's something that we do in podcasts all the time, because we're here
Yeah.
to interview you and make you shine. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how you got all the information out. I
Yeah.
love it. So yeah, I know we have all these books of yours that you've shown us throughout the course of this podcast. We know we can find it on Amazon, I know. And do you have any other sites that, if our audience was interested in learning a little bit more about what you do, where can they?
Well, my website is about to get a major revamp since it's a little on the old side at this point. But check it out in like another month or so and see what's happening there. There's a lot of my old podcasts on there,
Oh,
that I've done
great.
about particular books, about, various things. I'm sure there'll be more when There Is No Other comes out in the fall from Harper. And Dying to Know's out now. So that one's just gearing up. That just came out.
Understood. And I said it's
Um,
coming out in the fall. Are we talking 2025 then?
yeah. Well, we're
Okay.
almost at 2025. Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, but
A couple of weeks.
here I am thinking it's fall right now, but it's not. It is winter.
No, it's not.
But yeah, okay. So to all of our listeners, then, be on the lookout next fall when the book comes out because, this is going to be very meaningful stuff. So, I mean, as it comes closer to the release, too, we'd love to have you back on the show and we could,
Be great.
do a little bit of getting everybody excited for it when the time gets
Mhm.
even closer. So,
Yes, it's got a lot of classic Ram Dass in it, so it's anyone who enjoys him and his way of thinking and talking about things will find a lot in it.
yeah, I definitely, I would love to dive more into it when, as it gets closer to publication, get everybody excited, they could start, ordering it themselves to get ready for the release too. So,
And of course, I also have to deal with the fact that there are a lot of people now who don't know who Ram Dass is. It's
I did have to do a little bit of research myself even. So this is something
yes,
that your work is important for, showing us who he is and spreading that message still to this day.
yeah, because I'm part of the cohort that of the Westerners who went to the East, late '60s, early '70s, and brought back a lot of the spiritual traditions and spiritual ways in, shall we say, from the East. I mean, we're very good friends with a lot of the Buddhists who have been the main people in the mindfulness movement, like Jack Kornfield and Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein. And they're all part of There Is No Other as well. I've somehow included them in.
Got it. Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad that you were able to, combine all those stories too. Again, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. I think we learned a lot about your experiences and the amazing, completely unique and diverse different things you've done in your life. It's incredible to think about. So to all of our listeners today, I mean, she's done all of this. And, even later in her life, she's still making incredible achievements. So no matter what point in your life you are now, to our listeners, follow her lead. If you haven't written your own book, get out there and write it. Right? Follow your dreams. Like she just said, to find your true passion, just keep doing what you're doing. It's going to come to you. You'll find that need that the book needs to be written. So another piece of advice we can leave everybody off with today, for sure.
Okay, great.
As we wrap up this fantastic, fascinating conversation, just remember that, spiritual connection can transcend time and space, even physical presence. And that's something that you really teach us in your work, especially, Whisper in the Heart, as I understand, can show us that authentic experiences aren't limited to any time, place, or person. It's available to anyone who wants to open themselves to it. And, if you have an experience like that, I'm sure you could reach out to our guest here today and talk about it and, experience it for yourself as you read her books. So amazing resources there. And remember, if you're interested in learning more about it, you can visit her website. You can, download her books, buy her books, and be ready for next fall when the next one comes out. And you know what? Until next time, I mean, keep reading, keep inspiring, keep learning, and your message is going to come to you the same way it did for us. So thank you very much. Have an
Well, thank
amazing
you.
day.
You too. And
All
happy
right.
holidays.
Happy holidays. It's really that time.
Right.
All right. Have a great evening, everybody.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.